actually, there are more good things to talk about. First, though, I guess there is the controversy of the week, because I guess there has to be one. So basically, turns out that they thought this image was so, just so juicy and everything that they turned into a bowl of fruit. Now, overall, this is an interesting thing where, so number one, as an example, this one here, right? This is like, I forget the name of the painter. This is actually a reference to an old bit of actual IRL art that basically was quickly World of Warcraftified and put in vanilla.
Yeah.
I believe maybe it's the same for this one as well. Now,
No idea.
obviously, there's a bit of the old sexualization. Is it sexualization? That's actually a big part of it.
Well, it's what people would probably call it sexualization or something. It would fall under the general parameter of what people call the male gaze. That's what they would fall under. Yeah. They go, "What's that there for?" For mental.
Sure, that's just more me getting tripped up over what is the most ideal word to use to communicate.
Yeah.
Now, the sort of thing here is there's mixed responses.
That's for sure.
To be sure. Now, there's a lot of people who are basically saying, "Why are you doing this when you're not fixing your company?" Now, that's the sort of thing where I don't really think that this is anything that Blizzard thinks is going to fix any of those problems.
No.
I imagine if you think about the actual nuts and bolts of this is probably just a staffer asked their team lead if they could do this in the new patch, and the team lead was like, yeah, sure, whatever, you got the time, do it. Because broadly there is I guess some sort of desexualization of things in the game, and then of course this was picked up. And then you've got to deal with the aspects of the news cycle surrounding something where, the small details are going to be zoomed in on. And then, here's the thing, if you equally zoom in on all of the small details, then just the pure mechanics of sharing in social media will mean that, if you put equal effort, equal, weighting to all of your posts to 100 different things, you're not going to see them all rise equally. Yeah. You're going to see a small number of them explode way beyond the others because those are the ones that are most designed for the natural clicking and sharing mechanics of the internet, which is exactly what you have seen here. So that's basically that. It's the sort of thing it's just a part of it is where it's just really fucking funny where she's been turned into a bowl of fruit. That's really funny.
Grim and
really funny. And, there's lots of opinions here going from, this is sheer Puritanism, is Blizzard are just, going completely sanitizing everything. There's then people saying, this is good. This might make, staff at the company or whatever feel a bit more comfortable. Then, on Twitter, I asked people what they thought, specifically try to find out, what women thought. And I've got to say, it definitely... With women, it was not leaning in the pro. It was not leaning into this is a good thing at all, at least from the responses that I saw. Of course, do share what you think. But there's a fair few who are just saying, well, this is making... A lot of people are saying that making the change is essentially saying that, I guess it's like making the changes, based on, a premise of women as sexual objects.
Yeah.
So then you're removing that, which to a lot of people is well, hey, I'm a woman. I've got boobs. I actually quite like my boobs. Yeah. And, maybe if they're not cis or also, and I'm actually, give me some of the baba.
Of course.
Right. And so, there's opinions all across the spectrum. I think I've generally found more people not being super pro. Than being pro. Equally, I also don't particularly think Blizzard intend this to actually fix any sort of crazy big problem. But then there's also other things if you're going to remove something called bros before ho-ho-hos, then I suppose you do also sort of think surely is the correct response not to have more jokes in more directions. Why not have some sexy men? Or, things like that. There's, that's, so I guess there's, I'd say a lot of, too, when, I was trying to, find out, what a lot of women thought. There's a lot of people who are basically kind of more in the thing of, well, this seems like, this is rather sex negative.
Yeah.
And, I think there was a point in time, maybe the earlier 2000s, maybe around the 2010s, where, I think maybe sex negative was like perhaps overweight, and I think now perhaps the internet has changed, where it's like a bit more sex positive. So there's maybe something to deal with there. I think a really good example to talk through all of that is basically the character of Bayonetta, where I remember there being loads of kickback against Bayonetta from people who seemingly didn't realize that loads of women love Bayonetta, and Bayonetta is a character designed by women.
Yeah,
who saw it as like what she considered to be a power fantasy.
Yeah, there was. I remember that really pissed me off at the time because there was a lot of. That was a long time ago now too. Anyway,
oh, it's ages. Yeah,
yeah.
Grass feel old.
Absolutely, but people were like in the West and on Twitter and online and stuff were being really vile about the character designer and putting a lot of stuff that imagining the reasons for why she would design Bayonetta that way. And be like, oh, it's and was it internalized misogyny, they say? Stuff like that. It was like, oh, clearly you're doing this because, you want Bayonetta to be looked at by men. And it's just like, that's not how everyone thinks. There's the correct way forward is, generally speaking, likely liberation in as many ways as possible. It's because I actually saw people talk about this online and use a very nicely drawn illustrated comic to prove the point, which is World of Warcraft kind of does it wrong because its men are, they're kind of power fantasy-ish in a way in that they're all big and muscular and stuff, but they're not really sexualized. But women's stuff kind of leans a little bit more that way. And that's not really a way to do it. There are games that have no one's particularly sexualized. People using Dark Souls as an example for that.
Yeah.
Where no one's hot in Dark Souls unless you're, a bit weird about it, but generally speaking, none of the designs are very intended to be super sexualized. They're all like, this is a really messed up world. Under Armor, you can barely tell that female and males are different because your armor's so bulky and so big. And then there's the other way, which is more the FF14 way.
That's the way to do it.
Where for obviously you're gonna have a little bit of a demographic difference across in a video game, but generally speaking, for every 5 to 10 hot female characters, there's a really hot male character, and everyone's happy. Everyone's just running going, God, everyone in this game is so beautiful. No one has a reason to be angry about it.
You run around Limsa, because that's the thing, when you're new to that game, you run around Limsa because that's where all the people hang out with their glams. And you as a new player, you want to see what everyone's wearing because you're like, what is the cool armor and the cool things I can get in this game. And it's like every character's hot. In FF, I mean, okay, I'm gonna put a fence around the friggin' potatoes.
The Lalafels, yeah.
I'm gonna put a friggin' fence around the Lalafels.
Yeah. I thought that was implicit. Let's say.
Yeah, that should be implicit. But you look at the Mikates and the humans and the elves and the everyone, and everything is something that someone finds hot. Hopefully not including the Lalafels.
Yeah. And then you've got this incredible scenario where everyone is happy. Because everyone's happy. Same with Dark Souls. Outside of, I know Chad has now reminded me about Guinevere, obviously, but even then that was amazing chest ahead for a purpose. That was a point that had a logical reason to be in the story in a sense because of what she represented as a character, which is the fun thing about doing things like that. Anyway, kind of like I guess Aphrodite and Hades as an example, where you're like, actually Hades is another example that's not Eastern. Where everyone in that game is exceedingly hot. And as a result, everyone on the internet is very happy about it all the time. And people just love all of those characters being really well designed. And because they're gods, then they're the paragon of people. Of course, they're going to be hot.
There's probably another thing, too, where... So World of Warcraft, some of its older armor sets are pretty skimpy, right? It's big metal bikini or whatever. And that actually in itself is a pretty interesting thing. Because... From what I gather, it's not only men wearing those in their characters. It's not just men who want to be like, oh wow, look at my character. She's got quite a It's not that. It's actually loads of women who want to dress up their character in that way. And it's even walking into the office today. It's a Friday night. The students are all in town because it's Freshers Week, and I mean, look how people are choosing to dress themselves up. It's not in full battle plate. I mean, which it wouldn't be. We're walking down the street, but
maybe it should be.
If you're, some of the scuffles are going on Belfast, maybe, but if you're, sort of going out for a night in the town, perhaps people, are happy enough having gear that is like that for their character. Now, I guess it's a bit tricky because then if you're going to do that for a male character, it would kind of just be a stretch t-shirt because basically IRL, most men have no style.
Of course, yeah.
Which doesn't really work. And then people think about, okay, well, a metal bikini, and they sort of think of like older male gaze things, but that's quite interesting when it turns out it's actually not only men who are into putting those things in their characters. So then how do we respond to that? What do we do? And I'd say, put the Night Elf Sentinels in the like super skimpy, booby gear. And at the same time, what did the male Sentinel gear look like in the Darkshore campaign in last expansion?
It was the male version of that.
It was the male version of that, and it was appropriately skimpy for a male character, right? So I think that's more the response. I don't think it's as much to cover things up. I think it is to to open it up to everybody. Let's get some more sexy men going on. Let's get more ways for male characters to be dressed up and customized that are not just the super traditional male power fantasy. Look, I don't exactly know how to sort of, people talk about the male gaze. I don't really know how to female gaze a male character. Maybe that's people with that perspective. What do you want to see?
Yeah, well,
not to be super heteronormative about the whole thing, of course, but if you're going to accept that people do like the more scantily clad gear in World of Warcraft that generally speaking is only available in female characters, then I would say if people want that, well, let's work out and get that for male characters as well. And just open up to everybody. So everyone can get what they want. Because at the end of the day, just put more options in. Let people choose the thing that appeals to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there you go. I mean, hey, at least, Moonguard will be pretty happy about it. He'll be able to put more things on.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, what is there to lose? Because this is upsetting people, is making some people happy. It feels like kind of a loss. But if you just go, okay, everyone's really hot all the time. They have all the options to be whatever they want to be. Within reason, of course, because you can't just say, make every form of armor possibly available for everyone immediately because there are production issues where you're like, okay, you can't, design a load of stuff and just implement it. But I think there is a direction I think we generally have to go in as a community who play online games and kind of think about inclusion in an ultimately positive way, where it's like, make everyone happy.
Yeah, instead of take away the thing that some people like. Yeah. I will say, the other side of this for these vanilla paintings is, in many cases they do, they are in a few cases actually references to classical art pieces.
Oh yeah.
I don't say classical, I mean referring to a specific era. I just mean the past in general, because I don't have a I don't have a history of art.
No, they're Baroque actually. Yeah.
In my head, but. The other thing is some of these kind of stuck out because they didn't really have the World of Warcraft art style. That's the main criticism I would have. Anytime I'd see them, I wouldn't really think they would have fit into the game. There's a lot of people saying nobody ever noticed this. No, I actually really enjoy looking at all the small details. I remember going around Borealis and looking at all the table dressings and the things that was in the bookshelves, little doodads, and I do that for all the expansions because it's interesting to see what the prop department comes up with. So there you go. I guess the other thing then is the big love rocket. Certainly its icon looks less like a cock, which is quite funny because if people remember the recent Blue Origin, it was the Blue Origin one that specifically really looked like a big dong. It was quite funny. But they've changed that, so you could say it's a little bit less phallic looking, but also it does actually more closely represent the literal mount itself.
Yeah, that's the way I would say it is that's what the icon should have been the whole time. The fact that it wasn't was likely just them going, make a rocket, and someone drew the icon before the model was made. Something like that, I imagine. So, I mean, obviously you can see the intent, but also it is a positive change.
Yeah, so I think for this, if I was to sort of wrap it up, it's you know what, just open up to everybody. Yeah. Turns out, if people like that, I mean, why not? It's a game. It's not doing anyone any harm. And if you look at a game like Final Fantasy XIV, you see sexy ladies, you see sexy men, you see everyone. Mm-hmm. Everyone kind of gets to look cool in the way that the individual player who is playing that character enjoys. And then you put in G-pose, you put in a few the shaders and
G-shade stuff,
the G-shade stuff that people are able to do, and suddenly you have this entire fashion scene, and you literally have. I like it's sort of thing where it's like it's not 100% the thing that I'm going to be super interested in, but it's obviously a good thing to put into the game because if you look at all the people who like there's literal fashion magazines for FF14.
And they're gorgeous too.
I remember you showing me that
so
too.
nice.
I was this big, big PDF. It's all super high quality, and because they're using G-Pose and G-Shade, the stuff like it does not look like an in-game screenshot, and it's just like, oh wait, it turns out if you just throw a whole bunch of these cool tools at players. And you gave them loads of options for how they dress up their character, whether that is, super traditional, fantasy, power fantasy, or if something completely different. They got to do what they want. They got to express themselves. And is like the whole thing about an MMORPG and like a big virtual world, not like having a cool avatar and expressing yourself. So it's like, why not? So I'd say, don't just come down in the more... I guess like a more Puritan side and sort of hush, tidy everything up. Yeah. Instead, be like, well, no, people like that stuff, so let's just give everyone some toys. And it's like, I don't know. It seems simple enough to me, really. And I generally thought we were kind of like a little bit more out of like the super sex negative era into the more sex positive era. It seems like that's what it's been like online. I mean, especially like the massive rise of like the dating sims and all of that stuff in the West as well.
Yeah, of course.
Noticing that. So yeah, just seems to make sense. I had another final point floating around my head, but I think it's actually floated out of my head and it's gone now.
Nice, yeah.
Well, it's up there in the roof somewhere.
Yeah, no, I don't really have
Need
any.
an idea, Nat, to catch it.
That'd be great. Is that what Dreamcatchers used to do? No.
No idea.
No,
I remember being taught about them in school, but it's probably quite inaccurate considering it was a random primary school in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I think they were supposed to stop you from having nightmares, I think.
Gotcha.
But no, the magazine I was thinking of is G-Posers, and it's great. And it's the kind of thing where in the context of an MMO, you've got everyone being free to do creative things like a fashion magazine or, set up the player house as a strip club because why not? It's not really hurting anyone, I guess. Well, I guess depends on what permutation of strip club you're thinking, but the more reasonable ones. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say there's that which I guess is going to have some seedy connotations.
Yeah, it's
maybe more begins with C. Is it Cabernet?
Cabaret. Yeah, Cabernet is a drink.
Cabernet. That's a wine.
Yeah, so
that probably both go together pretty okay.
So that's more what I meant. More cabaret club kind of thing. Or a dancing spot, whatever you want to call it, a general club maybe. But I mean, it's great, and that's the thing. People are fully ready to do that. I, for one, would never put my character in anything that isn't particularly well covered, because that's just how I think about that character overall. To the point where even sometimes there's leveling gear I was getting, I was like, I have to glam that away. That doesn't look right for like how my interpretation of this Warrior of Light is, and the fact that there's like an internal consistent logic there is just strong, and other people can do different things, and it's great.
It's almost as if freedom is a good thing. Yes, I've caught it. I've
Nice.
got my idea and caught it back.
Got it back.
And I think it's just more the other explanation for this is that this is all art that is going to have emerged from an era of Blizzard Entertainment as a company.
Yeah.
That a lot of current Blizzard staff are, given everything recently, obviously not going to be particularly thrilled about. So they are certainly going to be looking at, the parts of the game that, perhaps stemmed from that older culture, which, in degrees has still existed up until pretty recently, let's be real. But they're going to want to take those things, they're going to be associated with that older culture, and they're going to want to sort of get rid of them. And a part of that's just because they're going to be quaking in their boots.
Of course.
Because of everything that's going on. And that's going to mean there's going to want to make some changes. Ultimately, it's not the most important thing in the universe because it is, in fact, some tiny JPEGs from the past. Not to say that they're JPEGs. They could indeed be another compression, another image format.
Of course. Probably BMPs, I don't know.
Yeah, got to be accurate, But anyway, yeah, there's that exciting, fun topic.